Today's video is sponsored by Audible. Stick around to the end for a great deal.
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? Are you ready? Get ready, dog. Get ready. Get ready. This be the green light, go. Tires burn the pavement. People wanna know where Mace, Posse, and Dave went. Still here, still in your ear with a style so hot, you'll see where all the sun rays went. Legs, arms, and head, all being moved in a frenzy. The blends be all the right cred, meaning credentials. Best of both worlds when we rockin' over pearls in the instrumental. Are you ready? Set, jump to the rhythm as hard as you can go. Keep it steady, to the letter right. Turn it up, we're doing a show. But can you rock it like rocket? What you talking about? Space out your mind. But can you rock it like rockets? Fool. Close to the counter. What kind? But can you rock it like rocket fuel?
What a year, huh? Okay, well honestly it actually wasn't the best for action cinema, at least not compared to the last few years. We saw some pretty amazing action films recently, and though 2019 had highs, I wouldn't say there was one I could point to as being standout in every way. There is a hell of a lot to go through though, so without further ado, let's dive into my 2019 action film review. And keep listening throughout, as I'll lay some of my favourite action film scores of the year throughout the video. Oh, and remember, every point here is my opinion, and my thoughts on any of these films don't discount your own. I'll get arguably the year's most impactful action film out of the way first. I've spoken a lot about John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum already in 2 videos, so I'll only quickly recap my thoughts here. I felt story and pacing wise the third film turned out a little weaker than the other two, but in terms of action effects, music, cinematography, and pretty much everything else outside of the overarching storytelling was, in a word, breathtaking.
You're breathtaking!
Similar to John Wick in terms of what I'd call old school action, we didn't get a whole lot with a sizable budget, but there was the latest Liam Neeson thriller Cold Pursuit, Rambo Last Blood, Angel Has Fallen, and the new Luc Besson lady-led action flick Anna, to name some of the few. I actually quite liked Cold Pursuit, which at times feels a sort of anti-action film. It certainly loses steam late in story-wise, but also has a decent enough shootout to cap things off. It does have an intensely annoying villain, but it's saved by a jet black sense of humour and a delicious mean streak. I certainly enjoyed it more than Rambo Last Blood. I went heavily into my issues with Last Blood in my recent video on the franchise, but basically, regardless of how you find the film's politics, to me it is a poorly told story that often feels, in terms of the structure and narrative, inept, with a surprising lack of action. Angel Has Fallen fared a little better, but I still found it to be surprisingly subdued for that franchise. It has some moments of explosive action at least, but its characters don't quite have the impact required to take you through the quieter moments. Anna never really picked up enough to hook me in, and it's really let down by the actual choreography just not living up to how skilled this character is supposed to be. It was slightly more effective than Polar though. Mads Mikkelsen does his best with it, but it's just let down by over-editing and a lack of budget. Attempting to be some kind of John Wick shoot-'em-up blend, it ends up as a very bare-bones approximation of each. What did sometimes stand out this year was more traditional martial arts cinema. The standouts for me were Zhang Yimou's Shadow and the Vietnamese film Fury. Shadow is possibly one of the most visually sumptuous films in years. If you've seen Hero or House of Flying Daggers, you're along the right lines of what to expect here. It is fantastic. Whilst Fury is a smaller scale contemporary story led by an absolute knockout Veronica Nyo performance, who carries this simple but effective tale of a mother fighting to save her daughter from organ harvesting gangsters.
Nhưng mày đã bắt nhầm con tao rồi.
Revenger 2 had its moments, though only in terms of the action starring its lead. There is talent here, but the fighting is often without much challenge for the star and thus lacks drama. And it's not till the final fight that you really feel rewarded for sitting through the bare bones narrative. However, in terms of martial arts action, I'm not sure there was more hype this year than for Ip Man 4 the finale, and for good reason. I had high hopes for this final chapter in a series I've enjoyed greatly so far, and though this is more the level of the third film than the initial two, I found it to be a pleasing end to the saga.
Is this your Chinese Kung Fu?
Though it suffers from not having Ip Man's family as much as previously, it wisely conflates the preservation of his son with the preservation of Chinese Kung Fu to maintain a heartfelt story that may even leave you a little misty-eyed by the end. For some, it perhaps won't do as much with Bruce Lee as hoped, but I liked that it remained the story of Ip Man predominantly. I wouldn't say it had the best fights of the series, but as 2019 goes, it certainly has some of the better hand-to-hand fighting of the year. In the end, you have Donnie Yen versus Scott Adkins with the flamboyant but visceral action of Wilson Yip and Yuen Woo-ping. So if you liked the previous three, you're gonna get exactly what you want here. On the subject of Ip Man, I of course saw Master Z Ip Man Legacy this year as well, a spin-off following Max Zhang's character from the third film, directed by Yuen Woo-ping. You really feel here a reverence for the Shaw Brothers classics of old in how it is put together, more than in the Ip Man films. But I didn't find the stuffy tone of those older classics meshed well with the underworld heroin dealing plot found here. The fights of course have a grace that is lacking in the storytelling, making it a decent enough throwback, but a bit of a chore between fights. Returning to Scott Adkins with this time a homegrown delight for me, Avengement offers the exact opposite feel to the traditional carefully composed Master Z, with its central story of a guy holding up a pub of gangsters that slowly develops by flashbacks toward a savage finale that quickly became my favourite fight scene of the year. With impressive choreography that makes it the most precise version of a scrap you could ever hope to see, I urge you to check it out. The same director and actor worked on Triple Threat as well, which was touted as a sort of Avengers team-up of action stars of the moment, that sadly didn't quite live up to the potential of that concept. The fight scenes are undeniably impressive, but everything around those beatdowns is somewhat forgettable. I did get a chance to check out The Hard Way, which is another film where Michael Jai White proves himself to be far better than a lot of the material he's working with these days. That this guy.
Enough from the clown!
This guy.
I threw that shit before I walked in the room!
Is not more of a figure in bigger films is a tragedy. Here's hoping Outlaw Johnny Black is a big hit, as White is a great actor and deserves to be a huge star. A change of pace now with of course not an action film. Climax dropped on Netflix this year and impressed me as both a very stressful, disorientating experience that also reminded me of its opening set piece and incredible tracking shots just how similar musical drama can be to the staging of an action scene. And it has way more kinetic energy than most of the cinema I saw this year. Sticking with Netflix for something a little more action adjacent, it wasn't an action film, but The Battle in the King impressed me. Purposely shot from ground level, it definitely got across the feeling of just how difficult something like this would be. And Triple Frontier, also by Netflix, didn't quite have the same impact on me as a whole as The King, but I certainly liked it more than many.
Oh, kill them! Just kill them!
Its efficient and tense violent sequences are worth watching it for alone, and though it may feel a bit slow, I appreciated its Joseph Conrad-esque descent into an increasingly hellish situation. Finally, with Netflix, I checked out their show Wu Assassins, which promised a mix of martial arts mayhem and strange mysticism. And it was okay in that regard. It's also a bit of a mess, sadly, and the clunky dialogue and awkward plotting made it a bit of a chore between fights that sometimes take far too long to get to. That said, in terms of TV, of course, Watchmen and Game of Thrones impressed me this year. With the latter disappointing as a fan admittedly, but still delivered some stunning scenes of destruction. Barry, though, was the real show that struck me as something special in 2019. And I saw enough great TV in general to especially not feel the sting of The Mandalorian skipping this year for the UK. Which of course brings me to Disney and their blockbuster action-filled output this year. Or well, all of the blockbuster output of the moment really. Starting with superhero films. Okay, we got a fair few this year, and honestly, especially with Marvel, I've hit a wall. Superhero fatigue has set in for me. I am sure something will come along to surprise me at some point, but I found Endgame to be fine, if rather overrated, and struggled to really muster interest in Far From Home or Captain Marvel, save for certain moments. Some will say these aren't action films, but they are. They hinge on huge set pieces, and they're all just getting a little boring to me. When I watch them, I just see the same action direction second unit teams handling heavily CGI-filled set pieces in films that rarely have any stakes for the wider universe they inhabit. Now, there's not anything particularly wrong with that, but when I look at the quality of what we used to think was the best of blockbuster fare, and compare it to what we get now, I just feel we've lost something. I did love the recent The Last Jedi, but The Rise of Skywalker let me down this year. I won't dwell on it, and I will say the action is as usual well handled, though it lacks any moment as impressive as Holdo's Last Stand, for example. But overall, I found it a hurried, clunky film that too slavishly stuck to what has come before to really feel like a fresh but satisfying conclusion to the saga. Hobbs and Shaw from director David Leitch fell flat for me as well. The earlier moments where it, for example, lets a shot linger long enough to see that Statham still has it do work, but it lost me in its wandering plot long before its unnecessary Samoa finale. The overly CG action didn't help, which is at least where another car-filled blockbuster impressed, somewhat. Six Underground has a great first 20 minutes, followed by a very clunky rest of it that struggles to balance the expository sequences with its at times confusing, at other times exhilarating set pieces. It is not a good film, but perhaps that doesn't really matter. It is unfiltered mayhem for better or worse, and hell, at least it has teeth that most blockbusters wouldn't dream of. Alita Battle Angel fared a bit better across the board, with its Panzerkunst, cyborg martial arts and future sports sequences especially, at least having propulsive energy, until the film sort of just ended. It doesn't set up a sequel as much as stop this story so abruptly you get no resolution whatsoever. Staying with the theme of CGI characters, we get Gemini Man, which somehow comes from the director of the masterful Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but turned out a wooden story told about 20 years too late, with an undoubted technical achievement marred by strangely weightless fight scenes. Terminated Dark Fate started with a de-aged CGI character opening that I actually quite liked, but was followed by a film I found to be fine, if nothing more than that. It's certainly not as bad as many are yelling about, it's just an easy enough if forgettable watch that isn't a patch on the two films it follows narratively. Even the non-human blockbuster output was a real letdown this year. Godzilla King of the Monsters was just generally too overstuffed with all the things for any of them to make any impact. and the bloody but boring Hellboy just made me long for another Guillermo del Toro offering.
Oh crap.
It was a better year for general cinema overall than I'd say it was for the action genre, as without John Wick Chapter 3 and the various low-budget Scott Adkins and Asian works, not much would have come out this year action-wise to really thrill me. So looking to 2020, what do we have coming up that will be worth seeing? Well, when it comes to big budgets, it is a hell of a year, with No Time to Die finishing up the Daniel Craig Bond run, The King's Man, Bad Boys for Life, Black Widow, Wonder Woman 1984, Free Guy, Mulan, Bloodshot, Tenet, and Birds of Prey, which has action directed by John Wick's Chad Stahelski, and Top Gun Maverick, which I'm very hopeful for as someone who adores the original. I'm certainly more interested in next year's comic book films than I was this year. There's also the new Isaac Florentine Scott Adkins joint Seized, and hopefully the long-delayed Sons of the Neon Knight. So it'll be an interesting one for sure. And that is my wrap on the action cinema of 2019. So if, like me, you find yourself commuting a lot or simply want something to listen to when you walk somewhere, maybe consider gifting yourself or someone else a membership to Audible this Christmas. This year I really enjoyed, for example, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, and Audible offer an unmatched selection of other audiobooks, so there'll be something for everyone. If you sign up at audible.com/Rossatron, you'll even get one audiobook and 2 Audible originals absolutely free. So get something to help keep you company on your travels over the holidays with a 30-day Audible trial. Visit audible.com/Rossatron or text Rossatron to 500 500. Thank you and have a great Christmas.